Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm Alec Caberna. Two guys to my right on your screen. In the middle there, we got Mike Wolfgang. Far right side, Bill Mafia. Part of the Bills Mafia. We got Matt Morrison over there.
What's up?
Kind of odd you're wearing NFL, Matt. We're talking college football today. It's Wednesday.
Mike's wearing
How about hockey, dude? They had a big win.
Yeah, hockey's fine. I'm not saying anything on Mike, but Matt, NFL was yesterday, man. Come on.
I like wearing it.
Get it together. All right, so rundown quickly here for today. Starting off our college football rankings release. We're going to talk about some of the big games from this past week, and we're going to get into some Heisman discussion. Who do we think is our favorites to win the Heisman now that we've reached kind of nearing mid-season here of college football? We're hitting the bye week, so a lot of teams are going to start taking off. So I think it's a great time to kind of take a step aside and look at upcoming here on the Heisman. We're going to take a check back into Major League Baseball and, of course, opening night of the NHL. So, guys, let's get into it here with our top 20, our top 10s here. Before we get into ours, I'll give you the rundown for the AP top 10. First place via the AP was Georgia, Iowa in second, Cincinnati in third, Oklahoma in fourth, Alabama 5, Ohio State 6, Penn State 7, Michigan 8, Oregon 9, Michigan State at 10. Spoiler alert, none of us had Oregon in the top 10. I want to hear your guys' reasonings for that one.
I just think Kentucky's done more than what Oregon's done so far.
And I think with the loss of that big running back, that they're not going to be any good.
We got quite a big echo coming from you two, but we'll get into our rankings here. We'll break this down. We're starting out number 10, a team not in the AP top 25, but they were in our top 10. Kentucky, we have them all sitting at number 10. They creeped into this list. They're undefeated, and they're becoming a powerhouse here in the SEC this season, and they could potentially have some big things coming their way if they continue to run the tables. They have some difficult matchups coming up, but what we've seen out of Kentucky so far, I think, gave us all enough reasons to put this team into our top 10.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Actually,
I'm trying to, I don't know what's
before we
going
get
on
too
here.
much farther into this, I forgot our question of the day. So while you guys sort out your audio issues, why don't we go and do that? You guys try and figure that out. Who holds the record for most receptions by tight end in an NFL season? That was yesterday's question. The answer to that one, Zach Ertz. Question of the day for today. How many receivers gained more than 1,000 yards from pass catches during the shortened strike season of 1987 in the NFL? Leave your answers somewhere, and we'll get back to that one tomorrow. But yeah, so we put in Kentucky number 10 right now in our rankings, and I think an underdog powerhouse right now in the SEC. This isn't the favorite anyone's picking to win them. I mean, with the powerhouses of Georgia and Alabama slipping up, but even teams are kind of a little bit higher still in Auburn because Kentucky hasn't gotten into that deep SEC schedule yet. I believe they have Georgia coming up, though, this weekend, so that'll really be the test for them. Kentucky, it's in Georgia on Saturday, so, they got their first big test coming up, and Kentucky has a chance to either fall out of the top 10 or potentially stick right there at 10. Even with the close loss, if they can make this a challenge for Georgia, we haven't seen anyone challenge Georgia yet this season. If they can be the team that does that and challenge Georgia for the first time, this is a team that, despite a loss, could stay in the top 10, or with a win, go undefeated at 7-0 and probably move into that top 4 now with the quality win over the AP number 1 team. So what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Yeah, like you're saying, even with Penn State, like I use that example for them losing to Iowa. They only fell back a few spots because they lost to a better ranked team. But so if they keep it close against Kentucky, they should be able to hang around near that 10 spot.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Kentucky is definitely a contender.
Do you guys have your in your settings here, as we don't want to have our people go into your audio settings, is your speaker going out through your headphones or through your laptop? Because someone isn't.
Yeah, let me fix this here.
Well, if your audio is going out of your laptop, it needs to go into your headphones, because then everyone's hearing what is going on in the show, Matt.
All right, how do I sound now?
A little bit better. Yeah, better. All right, cool.
All right, we're good.
Tell me Mike doesn't look like Geno Malkin. What do you guys think? All right, here. So number 9 now on our rankings. A team not in the AP top 25 rank. Actually, it sits at number 10 in the AP top 10. Michigan State, we all had them sitting in this 9 spot. I think they're right on the cusp of those Big Ten teams, and I think maybe they're sitting a little bit farther back because of the fact that we haven't seen this team really be good in the last few years, as Mike's going to join us here in the middle of the screen.
Throwing a Malkin on there.
Yeah.
But, we got Michigan State now at number 9, but, Michigan has been up there, Ohio State, Penn State, they've all been top teams in the Big Ten these last 4 years. Michigan State's had a slide off, finding a new coach and getting back into the flow of things. Perhaps Mel Tucker has turned this team around. Right now they sit undefeated, but I think it's because of what they've done in these last few years that they don't sit higher up in these rankings despite being undefeated right now.
Yeah, you're definitely right with Michigan State. It's a process when you aren't ranked for so long. You have to move yourself back up to get back in the conversation. So, but they're putting themselves in a position to hang in.
Yeah, definitely with that big win over Penn State, they're going to move up. I put them right behind Georgia. I think I put them above.
Matt, we're talking.
Matt, we're Michigan State, not Iowa.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, it's called paying attention to the conversation.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out my audio.
Yeah, it's pretty abysmal. At the number 8 spot, we all were unanimous with this position. That team up north, old Mitch up there in that state. So, they've looked impressive on the season. They've had some great games, but I think now, these last 2 games, they've been a little bit closer for Michigan on their schedule. And despite that dominant start to enter the season, with their performance against Rutgers 2 weeks ago compared to Ohio State's performance against the same team, 3 weeks ago, you look, Rutgers was 7 points away from upsetting number 8 Michigan here, and I think you take that and you look at what Ohio State did, them blowing them out of the water by miles. It wasn't even close, and I think you start taking Michigan now with more of a grain of salt than you did before with their way to compete against in-conference opponents, especially they get the big win right after Rutgers by 21 points over Wisconsin. Faith was kind of restored in this offense. They got something going there, but then the next week, they only beat Nebraska by 3 this past weekend, and I think that's what we start looking at here with Michigan. Inconsistencies to produce in big moments. In games they should win, they're winning close. These are games they should be winning big. Nebraska is not a contender in the Big Ten. They are hardly even a good team this year, and they have struggled to field any sort of consistency out of that Nebraska team. So now, 2 of your past 3 weeks, these are games that you should be just absolutely blowing out your opponent. But now here they go with the 7-point win against Rutgers. They got the win against Wisconsin, but now 3 points against Nebraska. And this is a Nebraska team that struggled against Illinois. So you take this Michigan team now, I think, with a little bit more of a grain of salt than you did when they started out this undefeated streak. They're still undefeated, and if they were on the table, they'll be in the playoff and win the Big Ten. But they have to start producing in big moments to move up that top 10. What do you guys think?
You're definitely right, Alec. That's been our issue with Michigan for the last couple of years now. They don't produce in big moments. They don't necessarily do it when they have to. So yeah, that's where I stand with Michigan. They've done a lot so far. So we'll see.
They were kind of shaky after that Rutgers when they nearly escaped them, and then they really showed who they are now.
Yeah, that's for sure. Mike, I think your audio's still a little off there, so work on that here while we get into the next one. This is your guys' team. In total, because, this
Wait,
5, 6...
now?
That's better. So 5, 6, 7 right here in our polls. I think we're kind of different through everybody. We all were kind of throwing a mix up here with these next 3 teams. So we'll start out number 7, your guys' team, Penn State. They don't fall too far with the loss to Iowa, but I think you just look at the teams that just right ahead of them. You have Alabama and Ohio State. Both. 2 of those teams have good losses. With Ohio State's loss to Oregon, and then obviously Penn State has the good loss to Iowa, Alabama with the bad loss, but I think you almost have to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. So they're not going to drop too far with this because they're going to be right back in it. And if they aren't, then they fall out. That's how this works. I dropped them a little bit more than I think you guys did. I dropped them all the way down to 7th. You guys both had them sitting at 5th for Alabama, but now Penn State falling down to 7th here. They were in 4th, so it's only a 3-spot fall. And, it's a team that if they were on the table, they'll be right back up there in the top 4. And come Big Ten championship time, if they make the repeat against Iowa, it could set the table if they beat Iowa in that rematch, 2 Big Ten teams in the Final Four.
Yeah, that's why I left Penn State where they're at, because they probably have, like we talked about on Monday, I think we were talking about it, they probably have the best loss of... what happened there?
I don't know.
Matt, back away from your laptop. Mike, talk.
So we probably, we're good. You gotta stay back.
Matt, stay away from your laptop.
But yeah, we were talking about on Monday, I think it was. They probably had the best loss of the season, so I'm not going to penalize them too much for that.
No, I mean, if you look at it right now, best quality loss, I mean, you lost to a top 2 team in the country. There's not too many teams in the nation that can say that and are still a contender right now and undefeated, but their only loss being to that number 1 or number 2 team. I mean, you can look at maybe some of the teams Georgia faces, and we were playing the same conversation with Kentucky come this weekend here when they face Georgia. You know, both of those teams will be, one of those 2 teams will be a one-loss team with one of the best losses in the country, so you don't penalize them too much, and I think you almost look at that the same way for a team like Ohio State. You're not going to penalize them for an early season loss against what was at the time a top 4 Oregon. They slipped up. Oregon slipped there against Stanford, and we'll see if they can bounce things back into the season. But you know, we bumped them out of the top 4, out of the top 10. They were coming off a bye week, so you know, looking into next week. I think you look for Oregon, make that big bounce back, jump back in, but with Ohio State now sitting at 6th, it looks like a quality win for Oregon. So all they need to do is continue to compound this season and run the table the rest of the way. If you're looking at a Pac-12 champion here in Oregon with a 1 loss and their big win is over a potential Big Ten champion in Ohio State, I mean, if you look at that down the line, you say Ohio State runs the table, they win the Big Ten, but then you also have Oregon run the table there and win the Pac-12, you would have to give the win to Oregon over Ohio State. So even though we have Oregon sitting outside of this top 10, they are still very much in this race, and this is just more of a credit to what Ohio State has done in these last 3 games to put them in a position to move back into top 10s and get in there nearing the top 5 once more.
Yeah, and like you said, give Oregon credit too, because they had the loss to, or did they lose to Stanford? It was, and then they had a big injury too. So I mean, they're still hanging themselves in. They still have a chance. So we'll see what they do down the stretch.
Yeah, Matt, any thoughts on your end?
I mean, I agree with you guys equally. You know, they're coming back in.
We're talking Ohio State here, Matt. What are your thoughts on Ohio State? All right, you're coming back in. All right. Well, let's move in here. Number 5 now. You guys both had this at number 5. I had them at 7. It's Alabama. You dropped them from, well, what did you guys have them last week here? Let me take a look real quick. Last week, you guys had Alabama. It was unanimous across the board. I dropped them 6 spots down to 7. You lost to an unranked team. You guys only dropped them 4 down to number 5. What was your reasoning behind the minimal drop for Alabama here, despite a loss to an unranked team? I mean, we're talking Penn State here. Mike, you had them ranked 6th and 4th last week. They dropped 2 spots with a loss to a number 1 ranked team, but you only drop Alabama 5 spots for a loss to an unranked. What's your reasoning behind not giving Bama a larger drop here in the poll?
Well, okay, so the reason I had Penn State at 6 over Ohio State is because I think Penn State's loss is better than Ohio State's.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just had Ohio State higher because of what they've done recently.
See, Alabama, I really don't have an issue with it. I mean, yeah, I could see the argument that they should have fell farther. I mean, that's what the argument is for a lot of people, but
I think it was a fluke, and I don't think they're going to lose again. I really believe that. And A&M, they really came out and put everything they did in that game because they had a lot of doubters, including us. You know, we didn't think they were the real deal. We didn't think they were a good ranked team. And they came out and showed that. For
me, I know they're unranked when they did beat Alabama, but this is a team that was, even though we didn't like it, they were ranked pretty high at the beginning of the season.
Preseason, yeah. I mean, this is a team that started out in the top 10. They fell pretty rapidly off, especially with the 10-7 win over Colorado. I think that's when the doubt started to creep in for this Texas A&M team. But now, you know, they are back in the top 20 now, but you know what? You still lost to an unranked team. This is where I think we have to get into the talk between if a Big Ten team loses to an unranked, go right now, say Iowa. Next week goes and loses to Purdue. Iowa's dropping out of that top 5 faster than a rock off a bridge. I mean, they are getting penalized from going from number 2 with a win over a number 4 team to a team that's probably sitting down at 8 or 9 behind the team that beat them. So now we're saying we're putting Alabama in the same situation and it's just a fluke. Well, what about if Iowa loses? Is that just a fluke? I mean, maybe to us, but I think this is where you have to look at things from multiple different sides and treating teams the same way when one team has been better. I mean, you look at Alabama on the season, they haven't been impressive. This isn't the Alabama of old. They nearly lost to Florida, who then went and lost the next week. This is not the Alabama from last season or seasons prior. This isn't their defense from 2011. This is a struggling Alabama right now. I dropped them all the way down to 7th in this because I don't have confidence in Alabama this year to produce the way they have been, and even to produce against top opponents. When they have faced the biggest teams on their schedule, despite Ole Miss, who, I think a lot of question marks on if that is the real deal type of team with their shootout against Arkansas that we'll get to here soon, I struggle to think that Alabama is a contender this season with their struggles with a young quarterback. I mean, this is the same situation Ohio State is in. A young quarterback now that they're working with, both high recruits and both, highly touted as the next big guy, and they probably both will be. I mean, Bryce Young is still the front runner for the Heisman that we're also going to talk about later, but Alabama, I don't think, is that team this year, and you guys only drop them back to 5 on a fluke. What have they done to show you they even deserve a top 5 spot?
But, okay, well, I don't know if we've said on this show, but I've heard a lot of people say it. Between Alabama and Georgia, everybody was saying, right up until Alabama lost on Saturday, hey, these two teams are up above everybody else, nobody's touching them. So
Florida nearly touched them. It was a 2-point game, 31-29. I don't understand where people are saying that these are the best teams. I thought Alabama was deserving of the number 1 spot. You win the national championship. In my opinion, you are the number 1 team until proven wrong. They just got proven wrong. Well, they've been proved wrong multiple times this season. They have had not anywhere near the performances of Georgia or Iowa. Frankly, they haven't had the performances of Cincinnati. Cincinnati went in against a top 10 Notre Dame and blew them out in their home stadium. Alabama couldn't do it against an unranked team. They almost lose in Florida, 31-29.
Then I can make the argument when Alabama and Georgia, or it was a close game, but Alabama ended up winning, you probably could have switched them in Georgia then.
You probably. I mean, now looking back on it, I probably should have. When you look at Georgia right now, putting up undefeated shutout win after shutout win and dominant performances, that looks like one of the best teams in the country. And why don't we go ahead here with our next few so we're not stuck up on this for too much longer. Oklahoma sitting at number 4. I think a lot of question marks, but I like the move to the young quarterback.
Absolutely, and that's why I put him at 4. That young quarterback is unbelievable. He came in and really showed that, hey, Spencer Rattler's time is over. This guy
and I think this avoids the fall for them, right? I mean, it's a close game against Kentucky. I mean, against Texas, they rile back into this one and, make it close down the stretch, and they win the game and stay undefeated. And it's a game that they could have lost, and they were very nearly the losing partner out of this one. But I think you give Oklahoma right now the benefit of the doubt because they showed the change there and the ability to not get hung up on one thing and move out of Spencer Rattler territory. The crowd's been chanting for it, listening to the fan base, showing the ability to change. We've talked about it on this show already with Spencer Rattler, showing the ability to change, get out of that bad situation. We talked Red River Shootout on Monday's show, but now here on Wednesday, you're in that same conversation with Oklahoma. You like the reasoning, their ability to change and not stay stagnant. So I think we all kind of held them right there at 4, and we're waiting now to see what the young quarterback does. It was the same kind of reaction I think the college football playoff poll even had. You go back to the original 2014 polls when those came out. Ohio State loses their quarterback, right before the Michigan game. The committee didn't freak out and drop them down because of a quarterback change. They waited to see what this team would produce, and then, I think now we're in that same situation with Oklahoma. They change out their starting quarterback, and now we're waiting to see what they produce here.
Yeah, and like you said, I was thinking, because I talked about it on Monday with Oklahoma. I thought they were kind of overrated, which to that point they were. But the reason I didn't drop them is because, like you're saying, they're playing better with their backup quarterback, and I really didn't see moving them that far behind like some of the other teams that were below them. So that's why I kind of left them where they were at. So, but yeah, they look better. I mean, they came back against Texas when they were down pretty big, so it's working for them. So.
And this is nothing against Texas either. I like their young quarterback as well, and I think they have a running back that could win the Heisman. And they came out and played a dominant game, and Oklahoma came back, and it's like, we're not losing.
Okay, so now number 3 on our list, Cincinnati, undisputed number 3 for us. So Cincinnati has proven to us that they deserve that top 4 spot. And until they lose, they put up a dominant performance against Temple in the game they should have won. And right now they are in should-win games until they hit SMU, who was also a team undefeated who came off a close win. We'll talk that game a little bit later. They pulled off a 31-24 win over Navy. And right now that's the best team left on Cincinnati's schedule. So as long as it's a running the table as season for Cincinnati, we all have the belief that this is a team team that will be in the college football playoff, and I don't really think we need to talk much more on that as we get to our top 2 teams. Number 2, Georgia. Mike, you were the only team that put Georgia at the number 1 spot, and to me, this was a flip-flop right now, and the only thing that made me put Iowa at number 1, quality win. What is your best quality win? Right now, I mean, you talked about it. Penn State has the best quality loss in the country. That means Iowa has the best quality win. When you're going off, it's a 3-4 matchup. This would be a playoff matchup come down, 2 months later. If we're talking about this matchup in, 2.5 months, this would be a playoff matchup. And it's a potential Big Ten championship repeat matchup that could decide which Big Ten team goes to the playoff. And you talk about that as being the big impact. Iowa has the best quality win now in college football with that win over, or the most important quality win over a team in college football. So I have Iowa sitting at number 1 with Georgia number 2.
Yeah, I mean, so I was thinking about putting them at number 1, but I thought after Alabama lost, Georgia's like the next, or was the next best team because they were ranked number 2. But I know you talk about quality of wins, which to me is important. But when you hear other analysts talk, they always say, who is a better team? And to me, Georgia's a better team. So that's why I went with them. And I mean, I don't.
Well, in that same reasoning, Alabama's a better team than Cincinnati, but they haven't shown it on the field. It's what have you done for me this season? And I think once we get down into the College Football Playoff Committee and what they're talking here, that gets released on November 4th, so we're sitting less than a month away from our first college football rankings. But it's what have you done this season. It's not who you have on the field, because if that was the case, then the Final Four consists of Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. Those are your 4 best teams. If you're saying, this is the best team, what do they have out there on the field? That is the best player. I mean, you'll go Ohio State. With that reasoning, they should be unanimously number 1. They have the best wide receiving core in the country, the number 2 running back in the country, a top 10 quarterback in the country. I mean, that team should be number 1 if you're talking about it that way. But it's what have you done for me this season? And Georgia has done great things against bad opponents. Iowa has done great things against a great opponent in Penn State. It's what have you done for me, not what you should be doing for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, here. So let's get out of this. Spent 20 minutes there on the college football rankings. We'll get out of it. Get into some of the big matchups for some of these potential playoff contenders and a few other teams. So Ole Miss versus Arkansas. It was the game we actually forgot to preview last week. But, man, this one was potentially the best game of the weekend, an absolute shootout. Arkansas falls to Ole Miss 52-51. Arkansas out of any playoff consideration now, 2-loss team. Ole Miss still in the fight to pick up a top 10 win. Now they sit at 13th in the AP rankings with the win there. They're 4-1. I mean, it's a team that if they run the table, I mean, right now it's controlling your own destiny. What do we say? Run the table and you're in. If they win the SEC, you can't keep them out. So now it's just beat everyone else. Be a 1-loss team come that final ranking in mid-December.
I mean, yeah, keep yourselves in it. We talk about it all the time. Keep yourselves in it. Get the quality of wins like we talk about all the time. Like you were just talking about, get quality of wins. So, I mean, Ole Miss still has a chance. I mean, they will, if they keep it going, they will finish in the top 10 and get a good bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, just like that. But, I mean, Arkansas obviously on the outside now looking in. They desperately need everyone in front of them to lose. I mean, Ole Miss is kind of in a similar boat, but they need to win. But let's talk a little bit about this game instead of playoff rankings and all that. You go into, the 2 quarterbacks you were expecting to have the massive games. KJ Jefferson for Arkansas, 25-35, great. 326 yards, great. 3 touchdowns, great. And interceptions, not so great. I mean, if he doesn't throw that pick, this is a game that potentially goes the other way. But I think in this game for Arkansas, you have to give credit to this rush game. Raheem Sanders was 139 yards. KJ Jefferson had 85 rushing yards of his own with 3 touchdowns. So 6 touchdown performance for KJ Jefferson in this game. Really what kept this team in it. But Traylon Smith on the ground also 85 yards and a touchdown. So a dominant rushing performance from both sides. You even flip this around going to Ole Miss. Henry Parrish Jr. 111 yards. Jared Connor 110 yards and 3 touchdowns. Matt Corral even put up 94 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground to go with his 14 of 21 for 287 and 2 touchdown performance through the air. It's a narrow win. I almost want to look at this a little bit as, how does this impact Matt Corral's Heisman status, right? He doesn't put up necessarily big yards in the air, and that's what you want out of your quarterback. I mean, 14 of 21 for 287 yards. It's clearly a ground-dominated game, but I think you want a little bit more out of a Heisman contender, right?
I mean, yeah, from what we've been talking about him, Matt Corral for the whole season now being a Heisman frontrunner. So, yeah, we definitely want to see more.
Matt, what are your takeaways from this game here from either team?
I mean, Matt Corral, yeah, you definitely want to see a better performance. But, I mean, Arkansas was a top 25 opponent. So he's going to play
kind of like back-to-back
worse.
weeks, Ole Miss has kind of struggled a little bit to, get into these games. I mean, they don't score until the second quarter. They're down 7-0 going into the second, and then they finally jump back in and they score 21 in the second quarter, and then you realize, oh, we got a game on our hands when it's tied 14, well, when it's 14-21 going into the half, and then both teams come out with, 37 points for Arkansas and 31 points for Ole Miss in that second half. So it was explosions everywhere in terms of offense. One team had to win this game, one team had to lose, and it was a one-point game, so I don't think you penalize either team for losing. But on the other side, I don't really think you can give too much of a bonus to the other team for winning, because one play goes in one more yard, this game goes around the other way. So I think it was a good game. Ole Miss needed to win it. I mean, either one of these squads needed to win it to keep themselves in any sort of conversation. Ole Miss was the one that did it, but it's going to impact how we see Matt Corral down the future. 2 back-to-back weeks now against his 2 hardest opponents, and he doesn't put up the best numbers. I think come Heisman time, that's what is going to be talked about the most here. But our next game up here, another big win for Georgia as they sit number 1, obviously, in the AP poll at 6-0 on the season. 34-10 win over Auburn, and I think this kind of goes along to what we're saying about Penn State not showing that as your quality opponent. Auburn now dropping out of the top 25 once again. They were 4-1, they were right there on the edge again, and they fall out here with the loss here to Georgia. What do you guys take away from Georgia out of this game? I mean, they had a big one. Stetson Bennett, 14-21, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. Zamir White on the ground, 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Auburn, on the other hand, they had to make a quarterback change. Bo Nix went 21-38, 217 yards and an interception. They brought in TJ Finley. He went 3 for 5, 55 yards. No rushing game either for this Auburn squad. Cartavius Bigsby only had 28 yards on 10 carries. Jarquez Hunter had 18 yards. Sean Shivers had 16. And Bo Nix had negative 16 yards.
Yeah. But Stetson Bennett, let's talk about this guy. He's a backup. And he's coming in here performing at, I mean, he's not doing too bad. 231 yards. He's getting the job done.
I mean,
and
offense doesn't have to do much
dominant.
for Georgia. Offense doesn't have to do much for Georgia with this defense.
No.
I mean, this is the team 28-20 Penn State Auburn, so we know the offense can do well against good defense, because Penn State, despite their loss to Iowa, has a really good defense, and that was the game we talked about Monday. They probably could have won if they keep their quarterback in there the whole time and he doesn't get injured. Instead, though, this flips around, and Penn State's best win is an 8-point win against Auburn, who just lost by 24 to Georgia. So I think that's where Penn State has to run the table here in the Big Ten now. We're not talking Penn State, we're talking this one here with UGA versus Auburn, but Auburn, they have to find something else. Clearly, Bo Nix was not the guy that he was touted to be. He was supposed to be the savior of Auburn, right? Coming in after what his father did and, trying to live up to a legacy, which it was clearly impossible to live up to.
I mean, that was my biggest takeaway. You asked me what my takeaway was from this game. It was probably that. I mean, the inconsistency from Bo Nix. We've been talking about it countless times on the show. He's been good, but he's not been good enough, and he hasn't done it consistently enough.
He can't win big. He can't win in the big games.
So that was my biggest takeaway.
Any quarterback with a team like this can win against the teams you're supposed to. It's when the cards are down and you put your entire chips on the line. You're betting everything. You're all in at the poker table, and you're relying on, your king to get it done, and, it's a 2 of hearts that shows up instead, and you lose the game big by 24. I mean, this was a game Auburn needed to show. Even though we're going up against another hard opponent, we can make this close. They didn't need to win this, and no one expected them to. But Auburn has to be closer in games like this if they want to get back to the status that they were just at before Bo Nix was there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's one of the better players. So the inconsistency is, like we've been talking about, is what got him missing some playing time in this game. So that's my biggest takeaway from this one.
All right, how about this game here? Big game for Arizona State. They're now 5-1 on the season with an 18-point win over the team that upset Oregon, 28-10 over Stanford Cardinals, who are now 3-3. It was another big game here for Arizona State, and they're becoming the team to talk about right now in the Pac-12. And it's going to be Oregon versus Arizona State down the line, and I think that's a matchup everybody is looking forward to seeing. When you take a look at this game, Jaden Daniels didn't have to do much to the air. He only went 14-23 for 175 yards. The ground ground game is where this team shines. Rashad White, 96 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Daniels on the ground, 76 yards and a touchdown. Diamante Trayanum had 50 yards and no touchdowns, but Elijah Badger broke off a 22-yard run for a touchdown, and then Daniel Nagata had 21 yards on the ground as well. This is a team that likes to control the ground. They want that time of possession, and I mean, they had 31 minutes of time of possession. It was almost split even actually between them and Stanford, but the defense forced 3 interceptions on the other side of this, and it's a Arizona State team that I think continues to impress, kind of along the same lines as Michigan, right? They're winning big sometimes, not all the time, and you want them to be a little bit better before you move them up that ranking.
Yeah, I mean, and they've been knocking on the door the last couple of years, as we talked about. So they've looked better this year. They've gotten able to do some things that's getting them some wins. So they've been knocking on the door, and it looks like they're here to at least make a run at it.
And this is a team that we thought could struggle against Stanford since they beat Oregon, and they came out in domination. So they're here to stay for at least this season.
I mean, now you have to look back at the only loss for Arizona State, a team that we're going to talk about here in, just a moment, BYU. BYU is the only losses Arizona State squad has had, and they just got upset. A BYU squad that was ranked top 10 in the country, they lose to Boise State. That we'll talk about here right now, 26-17. Now you got to start looking at Arizona State. The only reason I think they're not higher up is because what Boise State just did to BYU in that game.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you look at BYU's offense here, they were okay, but it wasn't the level of domination we've seen out of them this season. It was the real reason they got up there in the top 10, but I think you kind of expected BYU to show a little bit of fall off. You expected them to slip up at one point this season, and I think this was the one they slip up in, and I think that's okay for BYU. It's not going to be the team they had last year with Zach Wilson at the helm. He was an all-time great quarterback there for BYU, and, it's going to take a year or two, if they continue to produce at this level, to get back to where they were with Zach Wilson, and I think they're working with a good young quarterback, and I don't think you give up on this team just yet. I mean, they're probably done for the season because a group of 5 team has to run the table and stay undefeated. But, with a guy like Jaron Hall at quarterback, he's a younger guy, and I don't think this is someone you give up on.
No, I mean, like you said, it's hard to replace a guy like that. So
I mean, he's only a sophomore, too, so Jaron Hall has a long way to go before he's in consideration for anything to the NFL. And, if he stays these next 2 years, who knows what he could be coming out of his senior season. He's done good so far on the year.
If he keeps putting up 300 yards plus passing every game, he's going to be up there by the time he's ready for the NFL.
I mean, yeah, BYU is in a tough Mountain West Conference. It's always been a squad up there that, is always confusing to look at. You never know exactly what you're gonna get out of the Mountain West at any given time, and you're going up against the squad in Boise State that historically has been the best team out of the MWC. So you expect them to win these big games, and it was a big moment for BYU to prove that they were the new team in this Mountain West, but Boise State's not getting rid of that title anytime soon. Despite the fact that they're 3-3, Boise State has always been the team to watch out for in the Mountain West.
Yeah, I mean, they always have been year in, year out. And like you were saying about BYU, it's they don't have the luxury of like some of these other. I mean, they're smaller schools, so compared to these higher up teams, they don't have the luxury to just get another quarterback that's behind them. They have to it takes time for them to develop somebody and even find somebody if they don't have somebody.
I mean, look at Penn State. I mean, this is a top premier program that, their first quarterback goes down. They don't have anybody to go next to him. It's very rare to be in a situation like Ohio State or Georgia right now to have 2 guys sitting behind your main guy that are ready to go at any given moment. It's not something you see. Same thing with Oklahoma. To be able to bring someone in immediately to perform. I mean, who knows what Taquan Robertson will be in 2 years down the line for Penn State. But, as you were saying there, it's quarterback play. It takes a while to rebuild into what you had before. So, this is a good moment for BYU, a great learning opportunity for a young quarterback, bouncing back from a loss here. It's still a top 20 team and potentially run the table, win the Mountain West here, and that's your only slip up. You might still find yourself in a New Year's 6 bowl game or another big one outside of the New Year's 6.
Yeah.
So next game up here, the Big Ten matchup, right? You're looking at Rutgers. This was a team that 7-point loss to Michigan. Then they get blown out against Ohio State. Now make it 3 straight losses as they lose by 18 to Michigan State. And I think you have to look at Michigan State and potentially start looking to put them over Michigan now. I mean, we got a long ways to go here in the Big Ten, and it's getting heated up real quickly. We're starting out with our big matchups here in just 2 weeks down the line. So this is a Michigan State squad you look at coming out of this ball game. One of the best running backs in the country, Peyton Thorne, also moving his way up on a few Heisman charts, 16-27, 339, 3 touchdowns and an interception for him. Kenneth Walker, though, on the ground. The big story, 29 carries, averaged 8 yards per carries with a touchdown, 233 yards for him. And the defense did a good job shutting down this struggling Rutgers offense. I mean, Noah Vedral has been the guy they've gone to all season, but now you've seen it back-to-back games. He gets pulled. They brought in Cole Snyder. He couldn't do much of anything else. Johnny Langan threw up a pass as well that ended up in the end zone. But this is just a team that just hasn't found that consistency once they get into Big Ten play. And you know, it's a long uphill battle for Rutgers and joining the Big Ten. This was a team that, you know, came out of the American Conference, I think it was. They were in the Big East a while ago before that shut down. It was a team that I think was still looking to find themselves. So it's a long way to go right now for Rutgers to get into Big Ten contendership. But I thought the 3-0 start to the season, some good out-of-conference play, and then you start off well against a team like Michigan. You know, you're nearly upset, and this is back-to-back years where they've nearly upset a big team in the Big Ten East. So a long ways to go, but signs of improvement so far for this Rutgers squad. But Michigan State, on the other hand, they did what they needed to. They win it by, you know, almost 3 possessions, and you get into this, you just go, you know what? Good game. Your running back did what he had to, and this is what you're looking for out of Michigan State. Control the ground. Let Kenneth Walker be your man. Don't rely on Peyton Thorne.
I mean, my biggest takeaway with Rutgers, like you're saying, it's going to continue to be an uphill battle for them because, like you said, you like the 3-0 start. We thought maybe, hey, they can maybe challenge some people when they start conference play. But, I mean, they hung in there with Michigan, but then they got blown out by Ohio State, and then they didn't play that well against Michigan State. So it's going to continue to be a battle for them. But I think they're in a good place. I think you like
the next 4 weeks, though, for Rutgers.
You do.
Though. I mean, they're in Northwestern, then they're in Illinois. They get to host Wisconsin, then they're in Indiana. So 3 road games and 3 tough road game places. Don't give them any, you know, discredit there in those stadiums, but 3 hard road places. But I think those are very winnable games now for Rutgers in terms of what they've done against the 3 powerhouses. They don't end the season well. They have Penn State before their final week. So, I mean, but a chance to potentially, you know, go 500 in Big Ten play. They're down, you know, 0-3 right now in the Big Ten, but you look ahead at these next 4 weeks, they could very easily be 4-3 before they meet Penn State there on November 20th.
And that will be a better record than they have ever had in the Big Ten. I mean,
oh yeah, for sure. This is a team that has been right at the bottom, you know, sitting around 2-5 every year in Big Ten conference play with wins really over Illinois.
They're starting to turn. I like what Greg Schiano is doing there. And then on the other side, Michigan State, Mel Tucker's really flipped that program around, especially that season last year.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a good turnaround for Mel Tucker, but we're getting a little bit lower on time, so we'll quickly move ahead to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. They nearly get upset by the Syracuse Orange 40-37 game. It had to go to overtime for the Demon Deacons to close this one out. And, man, they win it there on a last-second touchdown, or a touchdown in overtime after Syracuse puts, you know, the pressure on. They get the field goal. So if Wake Forest can't, you know, score back the other way, Syracuse takes home the win. So a good job closing out by Wake Forest. They continue to be undefeated, and they are right now the team to look at in the ACC. Sam Hartman, their quarterback, 16-32, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception. If they can get this ground game to work a little bit more efficiently, I think this is a team you have to look at as a serious contender. I mean, if Wake Forest goes undefeated and wins the ACC, which is very possible, I mean, we talked about it with Clemson time and time again. They didn't have to do much in conference play, and Wake Forest doesn't have to do much either. You look ahead at their schedule, they have Clemson on November 20th. That's kind of the big day in college football with a lot of big matchups. Wake Forest has probably the hardest Final 4 games of the season. They have UNC, NC State, who's ranked, the only other ranked ACC team. Then they'll have Clemson and Boston College on the road to finish things off. So it's going to be a tough finish, but if Wake Forest wins out this season, we're talking about another potential contender here for the college football playoff, which is getting quite crowded here quickly. Yeah,
and you look at Wake Forest, like this would have been a back-breaking loss for them because, you know, that would have been their first loss. It would have been 6-0, and like you said, it would have hurt their chances. But yeah, like in terms of the ACC, look at Wake Forest. I mean, you can even look at teams like Pitt in their side of the ACC. I mean, they're in first place now, but I know we're early in conference play, but that's a team you could look out for.
I mean, it's
ACC 's
definitely a
kind of
team
a
you have to
mess.
look out for, and Wake Forest is going to be in a challenging ACC championship game against that Pitt squad. I mean, Pitt is 4-1, so they would have to win the ACC and probably get lucky with another team. Or if Wake Forest gets up there in the top 4, then Pitt would be able to capitalize on it. But right now, Pitt is on the outside looking in. They have to hope Wake Forest gets up there come ACC championship time. But it might be one of the most difficult battles we've had here in the ACC championship in recent memory, with the dominance of Clemson finally falling off. Clemson could even prove to be the biggest upset right now for the Demon Deacons.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The Demon Deacons pulling off that win in the end. They did what they needed to do to win. But I want to go talk about Pitt for just a second. Kenny Pickett, I know he's not going to win it, but he was in that latest Heisman polls. He was kind of down the list more. But being in on that list, I mean, it's kind of good. I mean, it ups his draft, and it makes him look good, too. People start paying attention to Pitt.
I mean, a little bit. It's a Pitt squad that needs to rebuild. We don't have time to talk about them here today, but perhaps on a later show down the line, once we hit some of those big bye weeks, we can talk about some of these other teams that are potentially on the radar for the next coming seasons. So let's get into our final game here that we're talking about from college football. Another near upset from the American Conference. The Navy Midshipmen, they picked up their second win over the SMU, but the Mustangs pull out. The Pony Express keeps rolling this season to 6-0. 31-24 win. It was hard fought, and SMU pulls it out in the final quarter. I mean, how about I break down this box score for you? In the first quarter, both teams scored 7 points. In the second, both teams scored 14 points. In the third, both teams scored 3 points, and then finally, the fourth quarter, SMU puts up 7, the Midshipmen, none. So this was a neck-and-neck game the whole way through, and, you got to look at SMU right now as the team that Cincinnati has to be looking at going ahead. Cincinnati can't get caught up in, the glitz and glamour right now. They have to stay focused on the task at hand, and right now the task at hand is winning the game this week and winning the game handedly. This is a Cincinnati squad that can't afford any slip-ups, any close games. It has to be dominance for Cincinnati. And SMU is the team that, if you see SMU slip up and lose the next few, when they go up against Cincinnati, it's going to be a team that is very highly undervalued in the terms of this was a team that started 6-0. If, SMU goes 6-2 by the time they face Cincinnati or whatever, I don't remember exactly when their schedules line up, but, if that is a team that is coming in, it can be a very big underdog chance for SMU in that Cincinnati game down the line.
Yeah, and this is an SMU team that they've been hovering around this, 20-ish ranking for a couple years now, and they're trying to get themselves back. And like you said, yeah, this is probably Cincinnati's toughest team left to play. So we'll keep that one circled and see if that's a potential upset.
Okay, so that game also November 20th, another one of those big games we have going on. So, yeah, I mean, this is a chance that, if we're talking SMU 7-3, if they, lose 3 of these next 4 games against, they have Tulane, Houston, Memphis, and UCF. Those aren't, by any means, pushover teams. So they could very easily lose that, especially coming off a 7-point win against Navy here. You might see a slide in confidence. So, moving ahead, this could be a, 8-3 team coming into Cincinnati there. Luckily, it's in Cincinnati, so Cincinnati's going to be able to feed off that energy there. They've been having some big crowds, and I think as win over Notre Dame, you're going to see the biggest crowd in Cincinnati that they've had in quite some time. It's going to be electric there when they next go home. So we'll move out of here of college football just a little bit. We're getting to the Heisman rankings right now. Who's your guys' mid-season Heisman favorite?
To me, it's really up in the air right now.
It's very up in the air, which is kind of why I think we have to talk about this. You go into Bryce Young, he's still the favorite right now, actually tied with Matt Corral as the favorite, but neither one of them, I think, are putting up epic yards. Bryce Young just put up a career-high 369 passing yards. You look at some of the other quarterbacks in this, they've gone over 400 already on the season, and you're seeing Bryce Young never really putting it together, and he's obviously a young quarterback, so you still got plenty of time, but when you're talking Heisman, it is being perfect, and right now, I don't think we have any quarterback that's been perfect. I think this award this season desperately needs to go to a running back. Coming off a wide receiver showing that you can win the Heisman, we have guys like Kenneth Walker and Bijan Robinson, 2 in the top 5 right now for betting odds. Michigan State's Kenneth Walker at plus 1,600 and Bijan Robinson out of Texas at plus 2,000. You even have Travion Henderson just on the outside looking in at plus 3,500, tied with Kenny Pickett from Pitt as the quarterback. Then in Michigan's Blake Corum at plus 5,000, and then Alabama's Brian Robinson at plus 8,000. So I think this has to go to a running back this year because quarterbacks so far have played super inconsistent. There has been no quarterback, in my opinion, that has put himself out there in elite company, and that's just where we've gotten college football. You have to be perfect if you want to be the guy in college football and be that quarterback that everyone looks to in the draft as the number one overall guy. And I don't think we've had that this season.
But the closest quarterback, you're going to like this, C.J. Stroud. He's the closest guy.
I mean, I know he's third place right now in the quarterback rankings, but he is that guy I think you have to look at right now as if he continued to put up these numbers and go in against Michigan and Penn State, win those games and put up his numbers, and then takes on Iowa and then puts numbers on them in the Big Ten Championship. CJ Stroud, to me, is by and large the favorite if he can do that with the numbers he's producing. That's going to be a very difficult task, and I think Mike right there looking at it is not too happy with CJ Stroud, thinking about CJ Stroud coming in putting up 400 yards on Penn State.
He doesn't care.
I don't think he's going to put up 400 yards against that defense, but anyway.
If he does, he's a shoo-in.
If he does. If he can put up 400 against Michigan's defense, Penn State's defense, and Iowa's defense, and puts up that same numbers against the teams they should beat, I don't think you can put anybody else ahead of him.
No.
But I'm talking right now. You're talking right now, right?
Right now, yeah.
Like you said, I probably don't give it to a quarterback because there isn't one that sticks out to me.
No.
So I probably would give it to Bijan Robinson.
I like Robinson. I like Walker. He kind of snuck in there.
Kenneth Walker's had a few down games, though, and that's where I think you have to look at him. Bijan Robinson has been a lot more consistent. I think that Kenneth Walker's had the bigger games, but Bijan has had more consistent games so far on the season. I think that's the one thing that separates them. Then you have a young guy like Travion Henderson on the outside looking in. If he continues to produce the way he is, there's no problem him being in New York come selection time.
He's a beast.
All right, let's get out of college football here. Get into Major League Baseball, the postseason, getting fierce here. What'd you guys think of last night? We had two more teams punch their ticket. Houston, a big win over Chicago, and the Atlanta Braves taking the series against the Brewers. And Dodgers and Giants tied 2 games apiece right now. 1 game to go. That one on Thursday, October 14th at 9:07 before we get into ALCS on Friday and NLCS on Saturday.
Freddie Freeman. Walk-off home run. Awesome. He's the GOAT. He is the GOAT. And this is a Braves team. I think Mike and I were talking about it today. They have the lowest wins. They were 52 and 55. I think it was like August. They lost Osuna. They lost Alsuna. They lost all their top guys, and they're here.
Well, Matt, how about I give you this stat for your guy, Freddie Freeman. First player in Braves history to hit a go-ahead home run in the 8th-plus inning to clinch a series for Atlanta. So I think by and large a guy that when his time comes up in Atlanta and he decides to hang it up, that his jersey is put up right there in the rafters. That number goes with him.
That stat's kind of hard to believe, too, for how the storied history of the Braves. But, yeah, I mean, we're waiting on one more series here with the Giants and the Dodgers. That's the Game 5 one. So I don't know if you want to ask me about any games because I got pretty much all of these series wrong so far.
Yeah, Matt,
so
Mike, I'm right there with you. I need San Francisco to take this.
I picked the Dodgers, but I kind of would like to see the Giants win.
I picked the Braves.
So I don't know if you want to ask me about any of this because I got pretty much everything wrong. But if you so far, I mean, I'm not shocked the Rays lost, but I'm pretty surprised they lost. I mean, you were talking about the number 1 team in the American League. They're number 1 for a reason. That's what you were kind of picking your picks off of. But you got to look out for this Astros team. As much as we don't like them, they're still a good baseball team without no cheating aside. They're a good baseball team. And they're
by and large, you see the numbers they put up in last night's game. I mean, it was a dominant performance, and we've talked about the hitting time and time again for Houston. Despite the fact that none of us like them and we don't like what they did for the sport, it doesn't matter if you know what ball was coming in. They still hit the ball, and you still saw that this Astros squad, knowing the pitch, they were one of the best hitting teams in baseball history, and they continue to have guys that can put bat on ball, and when you put the bat on ball consistently, good things happen for your squad, and that's what's been happening right now for the Astros. Despite the fact that we don't like them and we want to roll our eyes every time we hear that name, and you say the Houston Asterix and this and that and whatever about them, they win. They win big. They're good. They're really good at baseball.
You know, they have good pitching.
They didn't need to cheat to win that championship.
They didn't, and you even talk about losing George Springer. They lost him. He goes to Toronto, and they still make the most. They make the most contact out of any team in the league. So, again, put cheating aside, they're a good baseball team. We got to give them credit.
I mean, I think you have to, and we look at this Boston team right now, also a 3-1 winner over the number one team in baseball, or right around their number one win team in at least the AL with Tampa Bay. Boston, I like what I've seen out of them in this series so far. I know we talked about them a little bit yesterday when they clinched that spot. But it right now, I think, is the favorite in the AL. I mean, it's going to be a fantastic ALCS between the Astros and, Boston. So, I mean, we're getting down to it. This is the meat of baseball. This is what we want to see out of, everything going on.
Yeah, I mean...
This is what baseball is all about postseason.
This is what people watch for. This stuff. Upsets.
Nobody wants to see, Tampa Bay versus San Francisco. You want to see St. Louis versus, White Sox. Some out-of-town matchup that you never can even think of happening. And we're on our way to do that.
Atlanta versus Boston would fit that.
I mean, Atlanta versus Boston fits that perfectly. And I think you even look at Houston versus Atlanta would do that. I mean, a 2 seed in Houston and a 3 seed in Atlanta. I think you move it into that conversation of unexpected. And this is going ahead and already assuming that the team that out of San Francisco and LA, the 2 favorites to win the title, fall out of it, against Atlanta. So that difference between San Francisco and the Dodgers could be very important come, it's going to be very important Friday night, and we're going to talk about that on Friday's show. But I think you have to look ahead. Does the team that comes out of San Francisco versus LA look like the strongest team to go up against Atlanta? I mean, do you guys honestly think that, that team will be able to take down Atlanta with the way that Atlanta's hitting right now?
It's going to be interesting because you talk about the way Atlanta's hitting and the way they're playing overall. I mean, they're getting good pitching. I mean, Charlie Morton's made how many starts them so far in the playoffs just in that series? I think he made 2 on short rest, on 3 days rest. So they have the depth there. And I know Matt was talking about they had the lowest win total between any team in the playoffs, which was 88 wins. But they haven't shown that at all. They've just hit a different level that they've been on in the playoffs. So,
well, it's interesting you talk about that multi-start on short rest for pitching. Remember what happened to Cleveland when they had to do that with their pitchers come the World Series time? That could be the worst thing. Now that we'll see a potential 7-game series for Atlanta, whether they're going up against LA or San Francisco. I think to win that series, they will have to push it 6-7 games. And if they have to use that pitcher more than once or twice in that series, that could be where you see Atlanta fall off. The fact that you have to use your best pitching multiple times. I mean, you saw it with Cleveland. They were the best team in that World Series, but then based on their pitching, but then they get the pitching injury, and here come the Blues, and everything goes downhill, and Indians lose.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the playoffs is there's no guarantee tomorrow. I mean, especially in elimination games. So you start a guy, you got to give him a short leash. I mean, you talk about managers only wanting guys to go through the order like twice, pretty much 2 times a game now. It's 1 time in the playoffs you go around the order. So 3rd inning you're making a pitching change. Every couple innings you're making a pitching change. And like you said, it catches up to you. I mean, we saw it with Cleveland a couple years ago. It catches no matter how good your starting pitching is, it's good to have it. But I
think that's where you have to give Boston the edge right now. You can see them stick with their starter for a while, or they have such a deep rotation they can move right out of it. I think you even look at that, same with the Dodgers type, and I think San Francisco a little bit shorter in that bullpen, but it's still a very impressive one at that. But how about we take the switch out of MLB postseason? That game tonight that game Thursday night should be great between the Giants, Dodgers. We'll talk about that game a little bit more tomorrow than Friday. We'll talk about the ALCS and NLCS for the rest of the weekend. But Matt, how about we get in, and Mike, how about we get into your team here, the Pittsburgh Penguins, pulling the big win against the Tampa Bay Lightning, defending 2-time champs 6-2 with some major goals for that Penguin squad. What a performance it was to open up the NHL season.
How about it? I mean, talk about a big win. Nobody expecting them to win. You're missing Crosby, Malkin, and Jake Gensel. I mean, they had guys playing that, like Matt was saying, could be future pieces for them and bench pieces right now. And I like what Tampa Bay's head coach said. Pittsburgh came in to win this game. We came in to just watch our banner go up. We didn't come ready to play. So Pittsburgh undermanned. They came ready to play, and they took it.
I mean, I got all the guys that scored here in the game for you. You had 2 goals there in the second with Heinen and Boyle. Then you go to this third period. You get goals from Simon, Bluger, Rodriguez, and Russ. I mean, that's a lot of goals right there, just right down the stretch. I mean, getting 4 goals in that final period, I think really was the closer out for this team. You obviously allowed 2 goals in the other end from the Lightning, from Sorelli and Killorn, but I mean, what an epic performance this was for Pittsburgh to open up the season. And didn't Pittsburgh struggle a little bit last season? This was a Penguin squad that I think suffered one of their few down years. I mean, it was kind of a down year. I mean, they were okay, and there was a lot to look ahead at, with Crosby obviously being the guy to go to that you have to look at. But there was a lot of, I think, young guys on this team that you guys even talking last year were ready to see what they did this season round. And I think you now see it here against a fantastic, great team in Tampa Bay. I know it's early, but I think that was the win Pittsburgh desperately needed.
Absolutely.
Especially coming off a baseball season in which the city's team didn't do anything. Even football right now for Pittsburgh's down. So the city needs something to kind of rally around. It might end up being the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. It's always somebody different in Pittsburgh that the city goes to, and it might be NHL this year. So Matt, go back to what you were talking about. I just have to throw that out there.
I'm sorry. Teddy Bluger, the guy's got speed, and he's young. And also Brian Rust, he's a veteran on the team. He can fly down the ice as well. Those are the 2 guys that you named that scored. Other guys, Jeff Carter.
Oh. Matt and Mike, I think both just froze. They're both in the same location.
What happened?
I don't know.
Alec, let's keep talking until he pops out. Mike?
He looks like he's a frozen one, but like Alec was saying, Matt, with Pittsburgh, I mean, them needing Pittsburgh needing a team to Alec, I think you were the one frozen.
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, I definitely and definitely did crash there, so my bad.
But like I was saying, like you were talking about with Pittsburgh, I mean, them needing a team. I mean, this team has been in the playoffs for 15 years, and they're looking to get back there this year, and they still believe with the healthy Crosby and Malkin and Gensel, with all the guys that we just talked about, they can still contend. So, I mean,
once you add those guys back into this lineup, they're dangerous.
And how about before we wrap up this show, we go one more game. The kickoff not the kickoff, but the puck drop. First time for the Seattle Kraken. They put in a great performance, down 5 of their main guys. They still lose just by 1 point to the Golden Knights to start off their franchise history. I think we even said it was going to be a loss to start things off for the Kraken, but it was going to be close. I think we kind of liked what we saw out of the squad. Obviously, I think Las Vegas is a little bit more their team that's always going to be up there now in the NHL, or at least they have been the past few seasons since they've joined the league. And Kraken, I think it's going to take them a little longer to get to that status, and we kind of touched on that piece yesterday. What did you guys think of Kraken in their first game?
I mean, yeah, it's going to take them a while to establish themselves. I mean, not everybody's going to be like Las Vegas when they first entered and go to the Stanley Cup Finals your first year, but what hurt them in that game, they gave up two goals early, and I don't think they had enough to catch up against Las Vegas. So they're a work in progress. They're an expansion team, so but yeah, they'll be fine.
Matt?
They have a lot of good players. Jordan Eberle, this guy was like the king of the New York Islanders. And then you got a couple guys from the Pens that are on this team, Jared McCann and forget the other guy's name, Tanev, I believe. And McCann got a goal in this game. Those guys very capable of winning.
That they are, and you know what? Not much time left here on the show, so we'll give you a quick look ahead to tomorrow. Thursday's show becomes college football preview day, as we have mentioned before. Kind of shaking up the format of the show with all these other sports going on. So we're going to preview college football, some big games coming up this weekend, despite a lot of big teams having byes. But Purdue and Iowa, the big one you got to look at. Kentucky, Georgia. We're going to preview all of them and make our predictions. Do we perhaps hear the bell once again? Perhaps here we'll figure things out. But make sure to tune in tomorrow. We're talking more baseball, going to make some predictions as well, and we're talking more NHL. So a lot of things going on, a lot of great things going on for the sports world. But as time wraps up here on the show, make sure to stay tuned on ysnlive.com. Power Hour coming up next. I'm Alec Caberna. Those two are Mike and Matt. We will see you guys all tomorrow. Peace out.